My parents abandoned me at my wedding because my sister wasn't married yet. You're selfish for getting married first, she screamed. I said nothing. 3 months later, they're begging to see their grandchild. Standing in my custom wedding dress, surrounded by white roses and candlelight, I couldn't take my eyes off the 3 empty seats in the front row. Each one had a gold-embossed name card: father, mother, sister. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, and a cold sweat broke out across my back. The whispers from the 150 guests pierced my ears like needles. Where's her family? Did they get stuck in traffic? How strange. What parents miss their daughter's wedding? I forced a smile, but tears threatened to ruin the makeup I'd spent hours perfecting, just like my family had ruined my last hope for their acceptance. My mother-in-law Linda approached, gently squeezing my trembling hand. Darling, aren't they coming? Should we wait a little longer? I shook my head, my throat so tight I could barely speak. They won't be coming. David, my groom, came to my side and firmly held my other hand, whispering, "It's okay. From today, I am your family. I promise you'll never feel abandoned again." The music continued, and I walked down the aisle with my chin up, determined not to let their absence steal this moment from me. But inside, my heart was shattering as I recalled the events that led to this day. 3 nights ago, my sister Emma's voice had turned to ice over the phone. "You know I'm 30 and still single. How dare you get married before me? You've always been the selfish one, stealing attention that should be mine." When I tried to reason with her, reminding her that at 28, I'd found someone I loved and wanted to build a life with, her response cut deeper than any knife could. "Mom and Dad agree with me. None of us will be at your wedding. Maybe this will teach you to consider your family's feelings for once." That evening, I made one final desperate call to my parents. Mom answered, her voice distant and cold. "Sarah, you know the rules. Emma is the older sister. She should marry first. That's how it's always been in our family." "But Mom," I pleaded, "Emma is focused on her career. She might not marry for years, if ever. Am I supposed to put my life on hold indefinitely?" Her response still echoes in my mind. "If you truly loved your sister, you would wait. Your selfishness is breaking this family apart." Just as we exchanged rings, my phone vibrated in my dress pocket, an Instagram notification from Emma. With shaking hands, I opened it to see her selfie at a luxury resort pool captioned, "When someone makes a selfish choice, the best response is to enjoy life. #perfect weekend, #family time." In the photo, she and my parents were raising champagne glasses, smiling brightly. Posted time, the exact moment my wedding ceremony began. The room seemed to spin around me. My fingertips went numb as the blood drained from my face. "Are you okay?" David noticed my expression change and asked with concern. I took a deep breath, locked my phone, and looked up with a smile. "I've never been better." In that moment, I made a decision. This wasn't the end, but a beginning. They chose my sister, and I would finally choose myself. From the moment I have memories, Emma was the family star while I existed in her shadow. Emma, 3 years my senior, was our parents' pride. She was valedictorian, debate team captain, and Ivy League bound. The living room walls were a shrine to her achievements, trophies, certificates, and professional photos documenting her every success. My accomplishments, if noticed at all, warranted at most a refrigerator magnet that would disappear within days. When I was 10, my parents completely forgot my birthday. I waited all day, hoping for at least a card or a small cake. Nothing came. That evening, they arrived home with shopping bags, excitedly calling for Emma. I ran to the doorway, thinking perhaps they had remembered after all. "Look what we got you," Mom exclaimed, pulling out the latest iPhone. "We know you've been stressed about your science fair project." When I quietly mentioned it was my birthday, Dad looked startled for a moment, then shrugged. "We'll get you something this weekend." Emma really needed this phone for her research. That weekend never came. Instead, I received a $10 gift card to Starbucks 2 weeks later, with a hurried "sorry it's late" scribbled on the envelope. By adulthood, the disparity had only grown more pronounced. Emma at 30 was the CFO of a growing tech company, perpetually single but holding out for the perfect match. I was 28, working as a creative director at an advertising agency, a job I loved and excelled at, though my parents dismissed it as drawing pictures all day. Then I met David, successful, kind, supportive David, who looked at me like I hung the moon. A respected architect who valued my career and encouraged my dreams. For the first time, I felt truly seen and appreciated. After 3 years of dating, he proposed on a weekend trip to the coast, down on one knee at sunset, with a vintage ring that perfectly matched my style. It was everything I'd dreamed of. I was so excited to share the news with my family, naively believing that surely this moment, this traditional milestone, would finally earn their approval. I bought champagne and drove to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, the ring box burning a hole in my purse. Emma would be there too, the perfect chance to share my happiness with everyone at once. "I have some news," I announced as we finished dessert, pulling out the ring with trembling fingers. "David and I are engaged." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad glanced up briefly, then returned to his phone. Mom's smile froze, then disappeared entirely. "This is quite sudden," she said finally. "You should have consulted us first." "Consulted you? About getting engaged?" I was confused. "I'm 28, Mom." "Still," she insisted, "these decisions affect the whole family. family. Have you considered how this makes your sister feel? I turned to Emma, whose expression had darkened considerably. I'm happy for you, she said, each word clearly painful to utter. Mom jumped in immediately. Emma is older, Sarah. She should be getting married first. That's the proper order of things. But Emma isn't even dating anyone right now, I said carefully, trying to keep frustration from my voice. That's because I have standards, Emma snapped. I don't just settle for the first man who proposes. Some of us are building careers, not just looking for someone to take care of us. David doesn't take care of me, I replied, my voice rising despite my best efforts. We're partners, and I love him. Love, Mom scoffed. What about family loyalty? What about tradition? Dad finally spoke up. Your mother's right. In our family, things are done in a certain way. The older sister marries first. It's always been that way. I looked at them incredulously. So I should turn down the man I love and want to spend my life with because Emma hasn't found someone yet? What if she never does? Emma slammed her wine glass down. What's that supposed to mean? That no one would want to marry me? No, I just meant you're focused on your career right now, which is fine. You've always been jealous of me, Emma interrupted. And now you're trying to steal my moment. Your moment? I was genuinely confused. You're not even engaged. But I should be, she shouted. I'm older. I'm more successful. If anyone should be getting married, it's me. I carefully placed the champagne bottle I'd brought back in my bag. I need to go, I said quietly. Think about what we've said, Dad called after me. Family comes first. Don't be selfish. I drove home in tears, wondering if they were right. Was I being selfish? When I told David what had happened, his response was immediate and firm. That's ridiculous. We're not putting our lives on hold indefinitely because of your sister's ego. This is our wedding, our life together. His certainty helped me find my own. For once, I would choose my happiness. We set the date for 6 months later, and I naively believed that given time, my family would come around. I couldn't have been more wrong. The 6 months leading up to our wedding became an emotional minefield as my family's resistance escalated from passive-aggressive comments to outright sabotage. 1 week after announcing our engagement, I invited Mom to join me for wedding dress shopping. I'd made an appointment at a beautiful boutique, complete with champagne and pastries. I'm sorry I can't, she replied curtly over the phone. Emma has a doctor's appointment that day. Nothing serious, just a checkup, but I should go with her. This became the pattern. Every attempt to include my parents in wedding planning was met with excuses, all revolving around Emma's supposedly urgent needs. 3 months before the wedding, I dropped off their formal invitations, thick cream cardstock with gold embossing that had cost $12 each. Mom accepted the envelope with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. We'll have to see if we can make it, she said, not meeting my eyes. Make it? I echoed, disbelieving. Mom, it's my wedding. And as I've said, your timing is very inconsiderate. Emma is struggling with this. The final straw came 2 weeks before the wedding. I'd called repeatedly to confirm their attendance, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. Finally, Dad returned my call. Sarah, we've been thinking, he began without preamble. If you care about this family, you'll postpone the wedding. Emma is in a fragile state. Fragile? I repeated, incredulous. Dad, she's the CFO of a successful company. She's hardly fragile. You don't understand the pressure she's under. All her friends are getting married, and now her little sister is beating her to the altar. It's humiliating for her. Dad, I love David. We've been planning this wedding for months. Everything is paid for. Guests are coming from across the country. I can't and won't postpone it. Then you've made your choice, he said coldly. And it's not your family. That night, I cried until 3 a.m., curled against David as he held me. Maybe we should just elope, I whispered. This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, and it's been nothing but stress. Is that what you really want? He asked gently. After a long silence, I shook my head. No, I want to stand up in front of everyone and declare my love for you. I want our friends there. Then we'll have the wedding we planned, David said firmly. And anyone who chooses not to celebrate with us is missing out, not us. The wedding week arrived, and still no confirmation from my parents or Emma. I made one last desperate attempt, driving to their house the day before the rehearsal dinner. Mom answered the door, looking uncomfortable. Sarah, this isn't a good time. It never is, I said quietly. Mom, tomorrow is my rehearsal dinner. The next day is my wedding. Please tell me you're coming. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Emma is having a really hard time with this. She's upstairs crying right now. And what about me? I asked, my voice breaking. Doesn't it matter that I'm hurting too? Of course it matters, she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. But Emma needs us right now. Mom, I'm your daughter too. She looked pained for a moment, then her expression hardened. If you really cared about this family, you wouldn't be putting us in this position. Emma is the oldest. She should get married first. That's how it works. That's not how it works in the real world, Mom. People get married when they find the right person, not according to some birth order rule. Don't raise your voice at me, young lady. I think you should leave. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Emma watching from the upstairs window, her expression unreadable. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone pinged with an Instagram notification. Emma had posted a photo of herself with our parents at the airport, luggage in hand. Surprise weekend getaway. Sometimes you need to escape with the people who truly love you. #family first. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange calm settle over over me. They had made their choice abundantly clear. Now I was free to make mine. The next morning, I woke with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Today was about David and me, our love, our future. I wouldn't let their absence define this day. But as I stood at the altar, staring at those 3 empty seats with gold-embossed name cards, I realized that while I could move forward, there would always be a scar where my family should have been. The wedding reception was in full swing. The band played our favorite songs, guests laughed and danced, and David never left my side, his hand warm and steady in mine. From the outside, it looked perfect, and in many ways it was. But the elephant in the room couldn't be ignored. "Where are your parents, dear?" asked Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly friend of David's family. "I'd love to meet them." For the 12th time that evening, I forced a smile. They couldn't make it, unfortunately. A last-minute emergency. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was easier than the truth. Just as I was finding my rhythm again, my phone buzzed with a notification. Against my better judgment, I checked it. It was Emma again, posting another photo from their emergency vacation in Cancun. This time, the caption cut deeper. "Some people prioritize fancy weddings over family bonds. We choose loyalty every time. #RealFamily, #grateful." The audacity took my breath away. They abandoned me on my wedding day, then paint themselves as the victims? David noticed my expression darkening. "What is it?" I silently handed him my phone. His jaw tightened as he read the caption. "Block her," he said simply. "You don't need this today." He was right, of course. But as I moved to hit the block button, a comment under Emma's post caught my eye. It was from my cousin Rachel. "Wait, wasn't Sarah's wedding today? Are you saying you all skipped it to go to Cancun? That's cold, even for you, Emma." Several people had liked Rachel's comment, and others were beginning to ask questions. The narrative my family had likely hoped to control, that I was the selfish one who had somehow excluded them, was already unraveling. The morning after the wedding, reality came crashing back. My phone showed dozens of messages, not from my parents or Emma, but from extended family and friends who had seen Emma's posts and were confused or concerned. Most disturbing of all, a message from my mother's sister, Aunt Carol. "Sarah, your mother is telling everyone you didn't invite them to the wedding. She's saying you cut them out because you're embarrassed by them now that you're married to someone from money. Is that true?" I stared at the message in disbelief. This was worse than I'd imagined. They weren't just absent, they were actively trying to destroy my reputation. "They're lying about me," I whispered to David. "They're telling everyone I didn't invite them." The next few days of our honeymoon were tainted by this shadow. By the third day, I could no longer enjoy the beautiful resort David had booked for us. "I need to respond," I told David over breakfast. "I can't let them keep spreading these lies." He nodded slowly. "I agree, but think carefully about how you want to do this." I spent the day drafting and redrafting a message. By evening, I had something I felt comfortable with. First, I posted a beautiful photo from our wedding, showing the 3 empty seats in the front row, their name cards clearly visible. My caption was simple: "Thank you to everyone who celebrated with us on our special day. Your presence meant the world to us. #gratitude." Then, I sent a longer message to the family group chat, explaining that my parents and sister were invited, but chose not to attend because they believed Emma should get married first. I attached photos of the formal invitations I'd sent them, along with screenshots of text conversations showing my attempts to include them in the planning. The response was swift and explosive. From Mom: "How dare you air our private family matters publicly? This is exactly why we couldn't support your wedding. You have no respect for family." I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. The truth was out there now, backed by evidence, and their reactions spoke volumes. What I hadn't expected was the wave of support from extended family members. Aunt Carol wrote, "I always suspected something wasn't right about Helen's story. You were such a sweet child, Sarah, always trying so hard to please your parents. I'm sorry I ever doubted you." That night, as David and I finally enjoyed our first drama-free dinner of our honeymoon, I received one more message, this one from my childhood friend Mia, who had remained close to Emma over the years. "Sarah, I don't know if Emma will ever admit this, but she asked your parents not to attend your wedding. She told them that if they went, she would cut them off completely. I'm only telling you this because I can't stand seeing how they're treating you. Emma's jealousy has always been toxic, but this crossed a line. I'm so sorry." I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Emma hadn't just benefited from my parents' favoritism. She had actively engineered it, manipulating them to maintain her position as the golden child. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but the confusion and self-doubt were gone. I finally understood what I was dealing with, and that knowledge was power. The months following our wedding brought a new sense of clarity. David and I settled into our new home, a charming 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Distance, I was learning, could be its own form of healing. My relationship with my family settled into into an uneasy détente. After my public exposure of their lies, they retreated. The extended family now knew the truth, and my parents couldn't bear the loss of their perfect family image. I had reduced contact with them to holiday texts and occasional group emails, always polite but distant. I would no longer chase their approval or acceptance. 3 weeks after the wedding, our dishwasher broke down, flooding the kitchen floor with soapy water. My first instinct was to call my dad. He had always handled household repairs. As I reached for my phone, I stopped myself. Instead, I looked up a tutorial online, went to Home Depot for the parts, and fixed it myself. When the machine hummed back to life, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with the appliance. "Look at that," David said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "My wife the plumber." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, no longer haunted by what I had lost, but proud of what I was becoming. This new equilibrium was tested 3 months after the wedding when my mother called unexpectedly. "Sarah," she said, her voice carrying that familiar mix of authority and martyrdom, "we need to talk about Thanksgiving. Your father and I expect you and David to be there. It's time to put this unpleasantness behind us." No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done, just an expectation that I would fall back in line. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we've already made other plans," I replied calmly. "What other plans could possibly be more important than family Thanksgiving?" she demanded. "We're spending it with David's family," I said. "They invited us weeks ago, and we've accepted. You'd choose his family over your own?" The accusation in her voice was palpable. "They're my family too now, Mom," I reminded her gently. "And they've shown us nothing but love and support. This is Emma's favorite holiday," she pressed. "She'll be so disappointed if you're not there." The old me might have wavered, might have felt guilty, but that version of me was gone. "I'm sure she'll manage," I said. "Give her my best." After we hung up, I waited for the familiar wave of guilt to wash over me. It never came. Instead, I felt a sense of lightness, of freedom. For the first time, I had stated my boundary clearly and held it without apology. Thanksgiving with the Morgans was everything a family holiday should be: warm, welcoming, filled with laughter and genuine affection. That evening, my phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. Emma had posted the usual family Thanksgiving photo, her standing between our parents, everyone smiling widely. The caption read, "So thankful for a drama-free holiday with the people who matter most. Some absences are a blessing in disguise. #RealFamily #grateful." I showed it to David, who glanced at it and shook his head. "She really can't help herself, can she?" "Apparently not," I agreed, but to my surprise, the post didn't hurt like it once would have. It seemed sad and transparent, a desperate attempt to pretend everything was perfect when we all knew it wasn't. 2 weeks before Christmas, I discovered I was pregnant. The 2 pink lines on the test appeared so quickly, there was no room for doubt. "We're having a baby," I whispered, showing David the test. His face transformed with joy as he pulled me into his arms, spinning me around our bathroom. "We're having a baby," he echoed louder, as if announcing it to the universe. That night, we discussed how to share the news. David's parents would be ecstatic. They'd been not so subtly hinting about grandchildren since our engagement. "What about your family?" David asked cautiously. "Not yet," I decided. "Let's wait until after the first trimester." But the real reason was more complicated. Part of me feared they would find a way to taint this joy too, to make it about Emma's feelings, to remind me that she should have been a mother first. At 14 weeks, when we'd seen the strong heartbeat on multiple ultrasounds, I finally decided to tell my family. I sent a simple group text to my parents and Emma. "David and I wanted to share some happy news. We're expecting a baby in August. All is going well so far." I attached a photo of the most recent ultrasound, the tiny profile of our baby clearly visible. Minutes passed with no response. Then an hour. By evening, I'd convinced myself they were busy, that they'd reply soon. The next morning, still nothing. I checked to make sure the message had been delivered. It had, with Reed receipts showing they'd all seen it. "They can't even congratulate us on the baby?" David was indignant as we ate breakfast. Then, just as we were leaving for work, my phone rang. It was Emma. "Pregnant already?" Her voice dripped with disdain. "Wow, Sarah, you really can't stand for me to have anything of my own, can you?" I was stunned into silence. "I was just about to announce my engagement," she said coldly. "Ben proposed last weekend. But now, of course, everyone will be focused on your pregnancy instead." "Ben?" She'd never mentioned a Ben before. "I didn't know you were seeing someone," I said carefully. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news." "Save it," she snapped. "You've always been jealous of me. First you had to rush into marriage before me, and now you're getting pregnant to steal my thunder again." The absurdity of her accusation was almost comical. "Emma, I had no idea about your engagement. How could I possibly have planned this to overshadow you?" "You always find a way," she said bitterly. "Just know that Mom and Dad are devastated that you're using this pregnancy to drive an even bigger wedge in the family." My patience snapped. "How exactly am I using my pregnancy to drive a wedge. By simply informing you about it, should I have kept my child a secret? You should have waited, she insisted. You knew this was supposed to be my year. Your year, I repeated incredulously. Emma, life doesn't work that way. People don't put their major life events on hold to give you the spotlight. They should, she said, and I was shocked by the genuine conviction in her voice. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally, but I'm not sorry about my baby. She hung up without another word. 3 days later, Emma announced her engagement on social media with a close-up of a massive diamond ring. The caption read, "The moment I've been waiting for my whole life." Ben asked and I said yes. Wedding plans to come. #finally my turn. The comments section was flooded with congratulations, including an effusive one from my mother. My beautiful daughter is getting married. We couldn't be prouder or happier. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. The contrast to her silence about my pregnancy was stark and painful. Not a single word of acknowledgement, no excitement about her first grandchild. Just radio silence, followed by over-the-top enthusiasm for Emma's engagement. The moment we've all been waiting for, David read, his expression darkening. What was our wedding, then? Chopped liver? I shrugged, trying to pretend it didn't hurt. You know how they are. I do, he said firmly. And that's why I think we need to be very clear about boundaries when the baby comes. This kind of toxic favoritism isn't something I want our child exposed to. He was right, of course. The pattern that had damaged me throughout my childhood couldn't be allowed to continue with our baby. As my pregnancy progressed, the silence from my parents continued. No calls to check how I was feeling, no offers to help prepare the nursery, no excitement about ultrasound photos. Meanwhile, Emma's wedding planning updates dominated family conversations and social media, with my parents fully engaged in every detail. At my 20-week anatomy scan, when we learned we were having a girl, I made one final attempt to bridge the gap. I sent a text to my parents with a scanned photo. It's a girl. Your granddaughter is healthy and perfect. We're thinking of naming her Lily. Mom replied hours later. That's nice. Did you see Emma's wedding dress reveal on Instagram? The designer is world famous. No acknowledgement of the gender reveal, no comment on the name, no joy about their granddaughter. Just immediately redirecting to Emma. Something broke inside me then, not in a destructive way, but in a healing one, like a bone that had been set wrong and needed to be rebroken to heal properly. I finally accepted what I'd known deep down for years. I would never be enough for them. No achievement, no milestone, not even providing their first grandchild would ever make them value me equally to Emma. And for the first time, I was truly okay with that knowledge. Because I had built a life filled with people who did value me, David, his family, my true friends, and soon our daughter. 6 months into my pregnancy, I posted my first baby bump photo on Instagram. Not an elaborate professional photo shoot like Emma would have done, but a simple mirror selfie in our bedroom, David's hands forming a heart over my growing belly. Building our family with love #babygirl #coming soon, I captioned it. I didn't tag my parents or Emma, didn't seek their approval or attention. Yet within minutes, I noticed all 3 of them had viewed my story. None of them liked or commented, but somehow, knowing they had seen it, had glimpsed the happiness they'd chosen to exclude themselves from, felt like its own kind of victory. The baby shower Linda organized was a celebration filled with genuine joy and excitement. Friends from work, college friends who had remained loyal, David's extended family, and even a few of my relatives who had chosen to maintain relationships with me independent of my parents. They all gathered to welcome Lily into our circle of love. Aunt Carol brought a handmade quilt, tears in her eyes as she hugged me. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you, she whispered. She always knew you had the strength to break the cycle. As my due date approached, I felt a surprising sense of peace. The nursery was ready, painted a soft mint green with woodland creatures adorning the walls. David and I had taken childbirth classes, packed our hospital bag, and installed the car seat that Robert had researched exhaustively. We were ready, not just practically but emotionally. This child would be born into love, not competition. She would never have to earn her place in our hearts or measure her worth against anyone else's accomplishments. Lily Morgan arrived on a stormy August morning after 14 hours of labor. The moment they placed her on my chest, red-faced and squalling, time seemed to stop. Her tiny fingers wrapped around David's thumb, and the look of pure adoration on his face made every contraction, every family wound, every difficult moment worth it. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. And she was. 5 pounds, 8 ounces of absolute perfection. Linda and Robert arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, bringing flowers, balloons, and more tears of joy. They held Lily with the reverence of people who understood what a miracle she was, taking turns cradling her and marveling at her tiny features. She has your eyes, Linda said, smiling down at her granddaughter. And David's chin, Robert added proudly. As night fell and the hospital quieted, I lay in bed with Lily sleeping on my chest, David dozing in the chair beside us. My phone, which had been silent for hours, suddenly buzzed with a text. It was from my father. Your mother and I just heard from Caroline that you had the baby. We would like to come see our granddaughter tomorrow. No congratulations. No questions about how I was doing after labor. No acknowledgement that they had been absent throughout my entire pregnancy. Just an expectation that they would be welcomed now that the baby had arrived. I showed the message to David, who had woken at the sound of the notification. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I looked down at Lily, so innocent and perfect in her sleep. Then I thought about my childhood, about all the times I'd felt less than, about the empty seats at my wedding, about the pregnancy milestones my parents had ignored. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. No, they don't get to ignore my entire pregnancy and then waltz in like nothing happened. That's not how this works anymore. I typed out a response that had been years in the making. I appreciate you reaching out, but now is not the time. You chose to be absent throughout my pregnancy despite my attempts to include you. We need time as a new family before we consider visits. I'll contact you when we're ready. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then turned off my phone completely. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. But tonight was for us, for me, for David, for Lily. Our new family, built on love and respect, not obligation and favoritism.